This is where the president has his most impact. You have a lot of room to maneuver there as commander-in-chief. We don't know who she is. We don't know what she believes. She's going to get paralyzed in the Situation Room while the generals have their way with her. Right now,
Jesse Waters.
Jesse, I don't like that.
Figuratively, again.
Take it back.
Have their way with her. Control her. Not in a sexual way.
While Janine Pirro and Dana Perino scolded him and Greg Gutfeld laughed, Jesse Waters took his joke about generals having their way with Vice President Harris out for one more spin.
That would be great. You know, like your sister does something and you're like speaking on behalf of the Waters family. I'm sure my mother was probably go on MSNBC tonight and said, my son, Jesse Waters, made a joke about Kamala Harris being manhandled by generals in the Situation Room, and he has desecrated the memory of our grandfather, and it's disgusting. I could see my mom doing that, and I wish I had a political dynasty so I could take shots as well.
We appreciate that. All right, you know what, Greg?
You see, this is what happens when the MAGA movement successfully normalizes their hate towards a political opponent. Their commitment to bash Kamala Harris based on her gender, from the former president down to loyal pundits, it eventually gets too explicit for the women that usually just laugh and encourage it. Next comes the disingenuous backpedal.
Listen to me.
Well, you know, on that note, maybe listen to this. There's been some attention to comments I made on the show yesterday about VP Harris. People are misconstruing my comments to mean something inappropriate. I wasn't suggesting anything of a sexual nature. I was expressing my opinion that Vice President Harris's current leadership style could be an issue if elected.
So if his joke wasn't meant to be sexual, but it was obvious that his co-host heard it as such, it still didn't strike him as important enough to avoid bringing it up ever again. He came back to it in the same episode before someone higher up convinced him to clarify the next day. They don't hear how much of an ass they make of themselves over their opposition to a woman pursuing the White House because their leader sets the standard that they then follow.
When world leaders sit across the poker table from Kamala Harris, they smell fear. They know her tells. Are you going to gamble our country away on a frightened woman too insecure to tell us who she is?
All of this aggression and dedication to put her in her place by reminding viewers that VP Harris is a woman in as many derogatory ways as possible is a flex for these guys. Outright disrespect for anyone has become the main rallying cry for this party. They somehow think it draws more people in.
We lost 13 great people. What a horrible day it was. We didn't lose one person in 18 months. And then they took over that disaster, the leaving of Afghanistan.
So after a month of calling her names and questioning her blackness, the Trump campaign gave up on insulting the vice president as an election strategy and decided to go insult the most sacred military cemetery in the country for a photo op. Officials from Arlington National Cemetery submitted a statement on the desperate and dismissive move. Federal law prohibits political campaign or election-related activities within Army National Military cemeteries to include photographers, content creators, or any other persons attending for purposes or in direct support of a partisan political candidate's campaign. In other words, he's not supposed to use our fallen soldiers to make himself look better, the same way he uses everyone else. But they somehow made it much, much worse.
He was in Section 60, which is the burial site for service members, recently lost. Apparently this visit turned into some kind of physical incident, and it sounds like people who were on the staff of the cemetery were trying to block a Trump campaign photographer from going over and taking pictures of Trump there at the cemetery. Your reaction to that? I mean, my understanding from visiting Arlington National Cemetery, I was looking at the website this morning. I mean, they have a lot of rules and restrictions prohibiting election-related activity there.
Not only did Trump's entourage go to use the deaths of service members in Afghanistan for his own glory, but they got into a fight with the cemetery staff who tried to stop them. His former Secretary of Defense also had some thoughts.
It's important that a report was filed. I think it should be investigated. We should find out. During my tenure as Secretary of the Army, I was kind of the so-called custodian of Arlington Cemetery, since the Army has responsibility for it. And there is no more hallowed ground in this nation than Arlington Cemetery, where we've been burying our heroes, our veterans, since the Civil War. So look, I think bottom line, the principle is that no person or party, either side, should ever use Arlington National Cemetery or any of our cemeteries or battlefields for partisan political purposes and or break the so-called rules. We need to maintain its prominence, its importance, its sacredness to the American people and certainly to the veterans. So I'm anxious to see what comes out of this.
If it wasn't despicable enough to use fallen soldiers as a catalyst to his campaign while it searches for something positive to report, it doesn't help that the entire debacle and the withdrawal from Afghanistan is due to Trump's art of the deal.
Does Trump bear part of the responsibility for what happened?
Oh, yes. I mean, so the whole premise of talking to the Taliban before you leave Afghanistan, why the heck were we even doing that? You know,
he was going to invite them to Camp David.
Right. Even the Obama administration, when they made the mistake of pulling all of our troops out of Iraq in 2010, which really set conditions for the rise of ISIS and so forth by 2014, the Obama administration didn't negotiate with al-Qaeda in Iraq on the way out. And so if we were going to leave, why not just leave? What happened in these series of negotiations and concessions to the Taliban is we kind of threw the Afghans onto the bus on the way out.
And they cut the Afghan government out of those negotiations, right?
Absolutely. So that was mistake one. Then forced them to release 5,000 of some of the most heinous people on earth, and then began
the Trump
to
administration
withdraw.
forced the Afghan government to release 5,000 Taliban.
Correct. And then also stopped the active targeting of the Taliban, which President Trump, again to his credit in 2017, had restored.
Trump's worst kept secret that only works on his supporters that refuse to believe that his negotiations with the Taliban facilitated the disaster during withdrawal, that's just the icing on the cake. Only the most self-important person would blow by all the reputable former advisors and military leaders' revelations about his part in the withdrawal, to bring even more attention to it by disrespecting the cemetery where those grave sites are revered.
You know what made us less safe is when Biden pulled us out of Afghanistan, 13 Americans died, and now
that was Trump's deal.
And now
that
the Taliban tells us, back off, don't kill al-Qaeda.
That's right.
Are you out of your mind, sir?
Same thing they would have done under Donald Trump. No.
Oh,
who cut the deal, Eric? Who cut the deal?
Who delivered the deal?
Donald
Biden
Trump cut the deal, didn't he?
No, Trump wanted
what would Trump have done?
He
what
wanted
would
to leave
Trump have done had he been reelected?
Remember? Sir, let's be honest with the people.
No, he did not. He absolutely did not. He did. Eric, you don't know what you're talking about. He wanted everybody out. He cut a deal to do exactly that.
Anyone that disagrees with you, we don't know what we're talking about. Trump said leave 2,500 there until we have a smooth transition of power.
He did not. Look, he said that after he cut the deal. The deal cut us down to zero. That's what Trump wanted. He wanted everybody out. The record on that is completely clear.
Over time, Biden pulled them out. Well, with Americans still there.
No. Read the deal, Eric. Have you ever read the deal?
Oh, stop it.
Yeah,
Stop
I know you got to go before you're embarrassed even further.
Yeah, and just like Trump's plan to keep the border politics brewing by directing House Republicans to not do their job so that he can campaign on it, they're using Afghanistan the same way. So a fake, heartfelt visit to Arlington was vital to their cause.
It was the worst humiliation this country has endured since the fall of Saigon, and Kamala Harris says she's proud of what she did. It was treason. It was treason, and is it any wonder that Putin then invaded Ukraine on her watch?
No, people are pissed. And as Mark Esper said, they want investigations so that something comes out of this. Especially when it comes off the heels of Trump's clueless dismissals of Medal of Honor recipients that they swore weren't meant to disrespect the military. But he's got a track record with how he feels about members of the armed services that dare disagree with him.
But Milley was a stupid person, very stupid. But, you know, we have great generals, but Milley was stupid. Guys like John Kelly are he's one of the dumbest people I've ever met.
And somebody that's been with me from day one, he's a real general. You know, we have the real generals, and we have the fake woke generals that did so poorly in Afghanistan, should have all been fired, but this is a real general, Keith Kellogg. Right, Keith?
I had just heard that it was the 10-year anniversary of the Republican Party freaking out over then President Obama wearing a tan suit. They called him things like desperate and unpresidential over the color of his damn suit. It's sad that in 10 short years, a madman that's openly advocating for the implementation of fascism while continuously disrespecting any and everyone that doesn't bow down to him and his demands isn't dismissed by the Republican Party as unpresidential. We did find out this week that there are about 200 Republicans left that can recognize reality.
This morning, more than 200 Republicans who previously worked for former Presidents George H.W. Bush, George W. Bush, and or former Senators John McCain and Mitt Romney, they signed a letter backing Vice President Harris for president. The list includes former chiefs of staff, press secretaries, campaign managers, interns. There are some interns on the list as well.